The crack of his palm against my cheek was like a firework in the stunned silence of the restaurant. A hot, sharp pain bloomed across my skin, but I didn't cry out. Instead, a strange, defiant smile touched my lips behind my shielding hand. My fiancé, Leo, had just publicly humiliated me, calling off our engagement for the factory director's daughter, sneering that I was an ungrateful drain on his resources. The air thickened with a mixture of pity and cruel amusement from the guests, each glance feeling like a needle prick. I blinked back the tears that threatened to fall, refusing to give him the satisfaction. As I lowered my hand, my gaze swept over Leo's smug, triumphant face and landed on the man standing like a sentinel behind him. He was a statue carved from discipline and silence, dressed in a crisp military uniform, the gold on his epaulets catching the dull light. He leaned against the doorframe not with laziness, but with the poised readiness of a sheathed sword, his cold eyes taking in the entire farce without a flicker of emotion. Something in me broke and then immediately solidified into a reckless, terrifying resolve. I pushed through the murmuring crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stopped before him, the starched fabric of his uniform rough against my burning palm as I clutched its hem. "Comrade," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Are you in need of a wife? The Civil Affairs Bureau will close soon if we're late." "Elara, have you completely lost your mind?" Leo's voice was a screech grating on my nerves. I ignored him, my entire world narrowed to the man in front of me. He was so tall I had to crane my neck. Under the brim of his cap, his eyes were a deep, unfathomable gray like a winter sea, calm but intensely scrutinizing. His mouth was a firm, unsmiling line. "Comrade," I pressed on, my courage threatening to desert me. "My name is Elara Vance. I'm a nurse. 21. Healthy. No bad habits. My fiancé." I gestured vaguely in Leo's direction, my voice gaining a slight tremor. "He's chosen the factory director's daughter. This banquet is my farewell party. If you're single, perhaps we could make do. Team up." My proposition landed like a bomb. The restaurant fell into a dead hush. Leo's face purpled with rage. "You'd marry a complete stranger just to spite me? Do you even know who he is?" "Who he is doesn't matter," I said, my eyes locked on the soldiers. "What matters is that he's here." The soldier's gaze held mine for a long, piercing moment. It felt like he could see straight through my bravado to the humiliation and desperation festering in my heart. I was certain he would dismiss me as the lunatic I appeared to be. Then he slowly straightened to his full height, his posture as straight as a pine on a mountain ridge. His voice, when it came, was a deep, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate in the air between us. "My name is Silus Thorne. My unit is short of a family member." My heart stuttered. Did he just agree? Without another word, he turned and walked out of the restaurant. I stood frozen for a second before scrambling after him, not even granting Leo a backward glance. Stepping outside was like entering another world. The afternoon sun of the 1980s was glaringly bright. The street was a symphony of ringing bicycle bells and the distant, hopeful melody of a song drifting from the supply and marketing cooperative's loudspeakers. Silus Thorne's long legs carried him swiftly, and I almost had to jog to keep up. "Thorne? Comrade Thorne." I panted slightly. "Where are we going?" "Civil Affairs Bureau," he said, not breaking stride. "You mentioned a marriage certificate. Let's go before they close." His utter matter-of-factness stunned me. I had thought he was merely offering me a dignified exit from my humiliation, a temporary shield. I never imagined he intended to follow through. We arrived at the nearly empty bureau. The clerk, a bespectacled woman in her 40s, looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Silus in his uniform. "Here for your marriage certification?" she asked. "Yes," Silus said, pulling his military ID and a letter of introduction from his pocket and sliding them across the counter. She glanced at the documents, then at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Please fill out this application form, both of you." I took the pen, my palm slick with sweat. At the section labeled, "Relationship to Applicant," I froze. What were we? Strangers bound by absurdity? A large, warm hand covered mine, gently taking the pen. Silus bent over the form and with swift, decisive strokes, he filled in the blank space beside my name with 2 characters. Husband and wife. His fingertips brushed the back of my hand, rough with calluses and smelling faintly of soap and tobacco. A blush instantly heated my cheeks. Stepping out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I clutched the glaringly red marriage certificate. It felt surreal. Less than an hour after being publicly jilted, I was married to a man whose name was all I knew. Comrade Silus Thorne. I cleared my throat. Thank you. For helping me today. He turned to look at me, the fading sunlight softening the sharp planes of his face. A faint, almost invisible scar traced his left brow, adding a touch of mystery to his stern demeanor. No need to call me comrade. Silus is fine. Silus, I whispered. He gave a faint hum of acknowledgement. What are your plans now? The question grounded me. We were legally married. We couldn't just part ways at the curb. I don't know. I rejoin my unit in a couple of days. You can come with me to the army base. My breath caught. Leave my hometown, my life. But my job. It can be transferred. Nurses are needed everywhere. He said it with such simple certainty as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I looked at him and a bitter laugh bubbled inside me. Leo, whom I'd known for 3 years, had always told me, "You're just a woman, focus on your job and stay out of trouble." But this man, Silus, whom I'd known for less than 2 hours, had already mapped out a new future for me without a second thought. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Earlier, why did you choose me?" I answered honestly, "Because you looked the least approachable." And that seemed far safer than someone like Leo, who is all show and no substance. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, so fast I thought I'd imagined it. Good taste. Was that a compliment? Before I could process it, a furious voice shattered the moment. "Ilara." I turned to see Leo running towards us, my mother trailing behind him, her face a mask of fury. "Ilara, you wretched girl. How dare you make such a decision on your own?" My mother rushed forward, her hand raised to strike me. The blow never landed. Silus moved with startling speed, stepping in front of me and taking the dull thud of her slap on his arm without so much as a flinch. "Who are you?" "Get out of my way," my mother demanded, planting her hands on her hips. "Auntie," Silus said, his voice calm but immovable. "I'm Ilara's husband." "Husband?" My mother scoffed. "Don't let this foolish girl deceive you. She just broke up with Leo today." "We just obtained our marriage certificate," Silus stated, pulling the red booklet from his pocket and holding it up briefly. The sight of it was like a bucket of cold water. My mother stared, her mouth agape. Leo's face cycled through shades of green and white, his eyes burning with jealousy and hate. "Ilara, you'd go to any lengths to spite me. Do you even know him? What kind of man is he?" "Whether I know him or not is no longer your concern, Comrade Leo," I said, peeking out from behind Silas's broad back. "When you were cozying up to Fei Wong in the grove, did you stop to think about whether I knew you then?" The color drained from Leo's face. He had thought his secret was safe. You're lying." I was done. I tugged on Silas's sleeve. "Let's go home." "Home?" my mother shrieked, snapping out of her daze and grabbing my arm. "Which home? You're not going anywhere until you explain. Who is he? What does he do? What's his salary? Did you even ask?" This barrage of questions left me speechless because I couldn't answer a single one. Silas's expression remained unreadable. "I am in the military. My parents are deceased. I have a younger sister. My salary is sufficient to support her." He pointed at me. "And her. The military? What rank? Soldiers live hard lives. My Ilara has never suffered a day." "Mom, that's enough," I said, my voice firmer than it had ever been with her. "If you continue, I won't come back." She was stunned into silence. I had always been the obedient daughter. Silus stepped forward. "Auntie, Ilara is now my wife, a military family member. Her well-being is my responsibility. It's late. We will take our leave. I will visit formally another day." With that, he took my wrist and turned, leading me away from their stunned figures. His grip was firm and warm, a solid anchor in the storm of my life. He led me through the streets until my mother's cries faded away. He stopped and released my hand. "Where do you live?" I gave him the address to the factory's staff housing. We walked in silence, the awkwardness between us a tangible thing. When we reached the complex, I stopped. "I'm here." He nodded. "Go on up." "Aren't you coming up?" The words were out before I could stop them. I immediately regretted it. No, he refused bluntly. I'll stay at the guest house. He handed me a slip of paper with an address and room number. Pack your things tomorrow and meet me there. We take the train early the next morning. So soon? Military leave has a time limit. His tone brooked no argument. I took the note, clutching it tightly. All right. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. He turned and walked away, his silhouette stretching long and lonely in the setting sun. I watched him until he disappeared, then turned to face the storm waiting for me upstairs. I opened the door to a flying teacup that shattered against the wall behind me. You dare to come home, my father roared from the sofa, his face livid. My mother sat beside him, weeping. I took a deep breath. Dead Mom. I'm married. The silence that followed my declaration was heavier than any shouting. My father trembled with a rage so profound he couldn't form words. It was my mother who found her voice, a broken, sobbing thing. Elara, how could you be so foolish? However bad Leo is, we knew his background. Silus? We know nothing. How could you dare? Dare. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. I dared to believe in Leo, and he made me a laughingstock in front of the whole county. Mom, I will not bear that shame. I can't. But you don't throw your life away on a stranger, my father finally thundered, slamming his hand on the table. You will go get a divorce tomorrow. Our family's reputation cannot be ruined like this. I won't, I said, my voice low but ironclad. The registration is done. It's legal. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you. The day after tomorrow, I'm leaving with him to join the army. How dare you? My father shot to his feet. What wouldn't I dare? I met his glare, my own eyes burning. I'm giving up my job here. And if I must, I'll give up you too. I will go somewhere no one knows me and I will start over. The words cut my own heart like a knife, but I let them hang in the air, cold and final. I saw the shock in their eyes, the realization that their obedient daughter was gone, replaced by this desperate, determined stranger. My father slumped back onto the sofa, looking suddenly old and defeated. He waved a weak, dismissive hand. Forget it. A grown daughter cannot be kept at home forever. Do what you want. Just don't come crying back to us when you suffer out there. His words were meant to wound, and they did. Deeply. But I just nodded, turned on my heel and locked myself in my room. I didn't sleep a wink. I packed my few belongings. Some clothes, my nursing textbooks, and the sewing machine that was to be part of my dowry. Early the next morning, before my parents awoke, I placed my house key on the kitchen table. I silently bowed my head to their closed bedroom door, then picked up my small suitcase and left without looking back. The home I had lived in for 21 years. I didn't cry. It felt like all my tears had dried up yesterday. I found the guest house Silus had mentioned. The receptionist gave me a suspicious once-over before directing me to his room. I knocked, my heart in my throat. He opened the door himself. He'd changed out of his uniform into a white Dacron shirt and dark blue trousers. He looked less like a sharp soldier and more like a quiet, serious man. His hair was damp as if he'd just washed. You're here, he said, stepping aside to let me in. The room was small and Spartan. A bed, a desk, a chair. My suitcase and sewing machine looped and out of place. Have you had breakfast? I asked, grasping for something to say. Not yet. Was waiting for you. He picked up 2 steamed buns from the desk, still warm, and handed one to me. Eat. I took it and ate in small, nervous bites. He finished his in a few efficient mouthfuls. An awkward silence descended. Any trouble with your family? He asked. I shook my head. It's settled. I didn't want his pity or to seem like a burden. He gave me a look that seemed to see right through my lie but didn't press. What are your plans for today? I need to go to the department store. To buy some things. For the trip. I didn't know what to expect at an army base, but I wanted to be prepared. I'll go with you. No, it's fine, I can manage. I'm your husband, he said, the words deliberate and firm. Accompanying my wife is natural. My wife. The term sent a jolt through me and I felt my cheeks flush again. I nodded, unable to speak. The county department store was the height of modernity. As we walked in, we drew stares. Mainly because of Silus. He was impossibly tall and handsome, carrying an air of quiet authority that made him stand out in any crowd. I was examining a jar of face cream when a sickeningly sweet voice sliced through the air. Well, if it isn't Alara. Found a new man to latch onto already? I turned. Fei Wong, the factory director's daughter, stood there, clinging to Leo's arm, a smug smirk on her face. A few other women from the factory flanked them, her usual sycophants. Leo saw Silus beside me, his face darkening. Alara, I never took you for so shameless. Just yesterday you were. Silus moved before Leo could finish. He stepped in front of me, his presence suddenly immense, his gaze turning to ice. Watch your mouth. Leo instinctively recoiled. Fei, however, was emboldened by her status. And who do you think you are? How dare you interfere? Alara, your taste gets worse. This one looks even cruder. Comrade, you should know she's just Leo's cast-off. Fup. The sound was sharp and shocking. Everyone froze. But it wasn't Silus who had struck. It was Leo. He had slapped Fei across the face. Fei stared at him, hand to her cheek, utterly stunned. You hit me. Leo ignored her. His eyes were fixed on Silas's shoulder, wide with terror and disbelief. When Silus had stepped forward, his shirt collar had gaped slightly, revealing a glimpse of his uniform underneath and the rank insignia on his shoulder. 2 bars and a star. A major. In our small county, that was a figure of immense, unapproachable power. Leo's face was beaded with cold sweat. He no longer looked at Silus, just grabbed a stunned Fei and practically dragged her away in disgrace. I stared at Silus, my mind reeling. I had thought he was just an ordinary officer. Scared? He asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. I shook my head then nodded. He almost smiled, the scar on his brow softening. From now on, he said, raising a callous thumb to wipe away a tear I hadn't even felt escape my eye. You have me. No one will bully you again. The train to the military camp was a grimy green. The carriage was crowded, noisy, and smelled of sweat, instant noodles, and smoke. Silus found us seats by a window. He stowed my luggage neatly, drawing disapproving glances from other passengers for taking up space, which he ignored completely. He pulled out a book. A dense text on military strategy filled with maps and symbols I couldn't understand, and began to read. The journey was long, 2 days and a night. The initial excitement wore off into a deep fatigue. I leaned against the window, my eyelids growing heavy. In my daze, my head lolled and landed on something solid and warm. Silas's shoulder. I jerked awake, embarrassed, but his hand rested lightly on my head, holding me in place. Sleep, he murmured, his voice a low rumble near my ear. It's a long way. His voice was a balm. I relaxed into him, shyly curling closer. This was the first time I'd been so close to a man other than my father. He smelled of clean soap and faintly of tobacco. It was a safe, comforting scent. I could hear the steady, strong beat of his heart. Thump, thump, thump. Like a lullaby. And I slept. I woke in near darkness, the carriage lights dimmed. I was covered with his army coat. He sat beside me, wearing only a thin shirt, eyes closed but not asleep. I could feel the alertness in his stillness. A wave of warmth flooded me. I carefully returned the coat. His eyes opened instantly. Awake? Hungry? I nodded. He pulled a greased paper package from his canvas bag. Unwrapping it revealed a whole roast chicken, a rare luxury in those lean times. Where did you get this? I gasped. Bought it before boarding, he said simply, tearing off a drumstick and handing it to me. Eat. I hesitated, seeing the envious looks from others. You have it. Just eat it, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He shoved it into my hand. The chicken was delicious. As we ate, our hands grew greasy. He took out a handkerchief, carefully wiped my fingers clean first and then his own. The gesture was so natural, so intimate, it felt like we'd been together for years. On the morning of the 3rd day, the train arrived at a small, dusty station I'd never heard of. Stepping onto the platform, a wave of dry, cold air hit me. All around were barren lush highlands, stark and desolate. A military jeep was waiting. A young soldier spotted Silus and ran over, snapping a crisp salute. Battalion Commander Thorne. Silus nodded. Take your sister-in-law and the things back to the quarters. Yes, sir, the soldier said, then grinned at me. Hello, sister-in-law. The address made me blush. Hello. Silus didn't get in. I have business. The guard will take you to settle in. The house is ready. If you need anything, tell him. I nodded. All right. The jeep bounced along a rough dirt road for half an hour before a row of neat barracks and a line of single-story red brick houses came into view. The young soldier helped me carry my things into one of them. Sister-in-law, this is yours and the battalion commander's home. I'm at the guard post. Call if you need anything. After he left, I looked around. My new home. It was small. 1 bedroom, 1 living room, cement floors, whitewashed walls. The furniture was sparse. A wooden bed, a table, 2 chairs, a worn wardrobe. But it was spotless. A new thermos and tea set sat on the table. The bedding on the bed was new, folded into a perfect sharp-edged square. Silus had prepared this. Thoughtfully. I unpacked, put on my own sheets, cleaned the windows. By the time I finished, it was nearly dark. Silus wasn't back yet. I was hungry and there was no food. Just as my stomach was complaining loudly, the door opened. Silus returned. He was carrying a string bag with noodles, eggs and some greens. Hungry? He asked, placing them on the table. I'll cook. You can cook. I was surprised. A little, he said, rolling up his sleeves and stepping into the tiny kitchen. Soon the sounds of chopping and sizzling filled the small house. I stood in the doorway, watching his tall frame move with practiced ease in the cramped space. The man who had faced down my ex-fiancé in a room full of scorn was now cooking a simple meal for me. My heart did a peculiar warm flip. It was just a bowl of noodles with eggs and greens. But it was the most delicious meal I'd had in days. After we ate, he cleared the dishes. I moved to help, but he stopped me. I'll do it. You rest. When he finished, the room was dark except for a single dim bulb. A serious, unspoken problem now lay between us. There was only 1 bed in the house. The air grew thick with tension. The 1.5-meter-wide wooden bed seemed like an ocean of uncertainty. I stared at the seams in the cement floor, my hands clasped tightly. Silus cleared his throat. You take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor. He moved to take the spare bedding. No, I said quickly. It's too cold. You'll get sick. I took a shaky breath. We can share the bed. The last words were a whisper. My face was on fire. Silus went still. He turned, and in the dim light I couldn't read his expression, only see the faint starlight reflected in his dark eyes. Aren't you afraid? He asked, his voice low. I bit my lip, gathered my courage and looked up at him. We're husband and wife. It was the path I'd chosen. And somehow I trusted this silent, serious man. A man who would defend a stranger wouldn't harm his own wife. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. He took another quilt from the wardrobe. 1 quilt each. Sleep. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, quickly climbing into bed and wrapping myself tightly, leaving only my eyes exposed. He turned off the light. The room plunged into darkness. I felt him lie down beside me, the bed frame giving a faint creak. A careful fist's width of space separated us. I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His breathing was even, but I knew he was as awake as I was. In the dark, every sense was heightened. I could smell his clean, soapy scent, hear the wind outside the window. Ilara. His voice was quiet in the darkness. Don't be afraid. I won't touch you without your permission. His words were a final, soothing balm. All the tension left my body. I turned over, facing away from him. Thank you, I whispered. Good night. Sleep. And that night, for the first time since the slap, I slept deeply and soundly. I woke to the clear, piercing sound of a military bugle cutting through the dawn. For a moment I was disoriented, then the events of the past few days came rushing back. The space beside me was empty. Silas's quilt was folded into a perfect, razor-sharp square, a testament to his discipline. On the table were several steamed buns and a bowl of still-warm millet porridge. Beside them was a note, the handwriting bold and assertive, just like the man himself. Gone to training. Breakfast is here. The medical team is at the eastern end of the family quarters. Report there to check your work assignment. My heart warmed. He'd thought of everything. After breakfast I found the medical team. The captain was a kind-faced female military doctor in her 40s, surnamed Chen. Wonderful, she said after looking over my nurse certificate and transfer papers. We're short-handed, Nurse Vance. Your timing is perfect. Life on the base was austere but simple. The interpersonal relationships, while not without their complexities, were straightforward compared to the gossipy web of the factory. I knew my warm reception was partly due to being Battalion Commander Thorne's wife, but I was also a qualified nurse and I was determined to prove my worth. I quickly settled into a routine. Days at the medical team, evenings cooking for Silus. Our life was quiet, almost peaceful. Silus was intensely busy, leaving before dawn and often returning after dark. But in the moments he was home, he was fully present. He taught me about the hardy plants that grew in the Gobi, shared stories from training exercises, and once even took me to the shooting range to watch the soldiers practice. He wasn't a talker, but he showed his care through actions. A book he thought I might like, a rare fruit he'd procured from somewhere. The other military wives were curious about me, the parachuted-in battalion commander's wife. They'd subtly probe about how we'd met. I stuck to the simple story. Family introduction. Love at first sight. It was easier than the truth. Most were friendly, but one woman, Mrs. Deng, who lived next door, always had a thinly veiled sneer in her tone. Her husband was the deputy battalion commander and saw Silus as a rival. One day while I was washing clothes in the yard, she sidled up to me. "Shawalair, your battalion commander Thorne treats you so well. But you know men can't be judged by appearances. My old Deng says the commander offended the division commander during the recent exercises. His future doesn't look too bright, I'm afraid." I stopped scrubbing and looked up at her. "Mrs. Deng, my husband's future is not your husband's concern. Perhaps you should focus on your own family. I heard Deputy Battalion Commander Deng has been getting quite friendly with that new girl from the cultural troupe." It was a complete fabrication, but I'd learned that with women like her, you had to fight fire with fire. Her face paled, then flushed with anger. She stammered, unable to form a retort, and finally scurried away, defeated. That evening I told Silus about it, treating it as a joke. He didn't laugh. Instead he looked at me with a deep, unreadable emotion in his eyes. "Elara," he said suddenly, and then he did something he'd never done before. He reached out and pulled me into his embrace. It was warm and solid and felt like coming home. I buried my face in his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "If anyone bullies you again," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear, "tell me. My woman, I protect her myself. My woman." The words sent a shiver through me, different from before. It wasn't just a statement of fact anymore. It felt like a vow. Time began to flow, swift and steady like the wind over the desert. 3 months passed since I'd married Silus Thorne. We still slept under separate quilts, but the distance between us had closed. He remembered offhand comments I made about foods I missed and would somehow find them. I started leaving a light on and keeping a bowl of soup warm for him when he returned late. We were like two trees planted close together, our roots slowly, quietly intertwining beneath the surface. The work at the medical team was steady. One afternoon, Captain Chen called me over, her expression serious. "Shawalaira, there's something I need to tell you." She sighed and handed me a letter. My heart sank. The handwriting on the envelope was horribly familiar. "Leo, how did he find me here?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Mrs. Deng brought it," Captain Chen said gently. "She said she found it at the compound gate. Just read it. Don't take it to heart." Back home, I stared at the letter for a long time before finally opening it. "Lara, I was wrong," it began. "Please come back. I found out everything. This Thorne is just a low-ranking soldier stuck in some godforsaken desert. What future does he have? A stinking soldier isn't worthy of you. I'm about to be promoted to deputy workshop director. Faye's father promised me. Once I have the position, I'll break it off with her and we can start over." It continued with sickening sweet nothings, reminiscing about our past. Disgust rolled through me. Deputy workshop director. He thought I was a commodity he could trade back for. Furious, I tore the letter to shreds and threw it in the trash. I was pacing the room when the door opened and Silus walked in. His eyes immediately narrowed. "What's wrong? Who upset you?" I shook my head, but his sharp eyes had already seen the shredded paper in the bin. He walked over, picked up a piece and saw the handwriting. His expression darkened instantly, the temperature in the room seeming to drop several degrees. I had never seen him look so coldly furious. "He wrote to you." It was a flat, dangerous statement. I nodded, seeing no point in hiding it. I told him everything. The ice in his eyes hardened. Without a word, he turned to leave. Where are you going? I grabbed his arm, alarmed by the intensity in him. To find him. The words were gritted out between clenched teeth. How? It's thousands of kilometers away. Silus, calm down. He's not worth it. He stopped, turned, and fixed me with a dark, blazing stare. If he insults me, I can ignore it. But he doesn't get to covet my woman. My woman. The words, filled with a possessive fury I'd never heard from him, shattered my composure. All the fear and frustration of the past months welled up, and tears began to stream down my face. Seeing me cry seemed to break his anger. The hostility vanished, replaced by a flustered helplessness. He reached out a hand, awkwardly hovering near my cheek. Don't cry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have shouted. It's not you, I sobbed. It's me. I'm useless. I always cause you trouble. You are not trouble. His voice was hoarse. Finally, his calloused thumb gently wiped my tears away. Ilara, he said, looking into my eyes with a terrifying earnestness. You are the wife I rightfully married. You are the one I, Silus Thorn, have decided to spend my life with. No one takes you from me. I cried even harder then, but they were tears of relief, of a strange and powerful joy. That night he didn't mention the floor. We still had our separate quilts, but before we fell asleep he reached across the space between us and took my hand. His palm was warm, dry, and strong. I didn't pull away. I knew something had fundamentally shifted between us. The next day, rumors about me receiving a letter from my ex-fiancé swept through the compound, no doubt courtesy of Mrs. Deng. The stories were wild. I was planning to elope. Silus was going to divorce me. I ignored them. But Silus took action. Not by confronting the gossips, but during a full battalion meeting he publicly applied for family housing. According to regulations, only battalion-level officers with stable marriages and long service were eligible. His application was a deafening declaration. Our marriage is solid. The rumors are lies. Mrs. Deng's face was a picture of sour envy. The day we moved into the new apartment, the weather was clear. It was much more spacious. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a proper kitchen and bathroom. Silus had built a small wooden shelf for my collection of skincare bottles. Looking at our new home, my heart swelled with a hope I hadn't felt in a long time. Our relationship deepened after the letter incident. He started calling me just Ilara instead of my full name. He began sharing more about his work. Which soldier excelled, which squad was in trouble. He still didn't talk much, but I learned to listen to the things he didn't say, to see the passion and responsibility he held for his duty. He was the silent, steady introvert. I was the talkative extrovert learning to fill our spaces with warmth. One evening he was cleaning his service pistol, a Type 54, its surface gleaming. I sat nearby, organizing our medical kit. In a few days I'll be going on a mission, he said casually. My heart clenched. Is it dangerous? Just a routine exercise, he said, but I saw the focused solemnity in his eyes and knew he was downplaying it. How long? Hard to say. 10 days. Maybe half a month. He looked up at me. I leave the house to you. I'll be fine, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. He didn't reply, just reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingertips were cool from handling the metal, but the gesture was unbearably tender. In that moment I wanted nothing more than to hug him. Before I could act, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Shouting. Something's wrong. There's been an accident at the shooting range. Silas's expression changed instantly. He was on his feet and out the door in a second, grabbing his cap. I ran after him. A new recruit during live grenade training had frozen and dropped the armed grenade at his own feet. Everyone stood paralyzed. In that heart-stopping second, Silus moved like lightning. He lunged forward, shoved the terrified soldier aside, snatched up the grenade, and hurled it with all his strength toward a distant sand pit. Boom. The explosion echoed across the range, dirt and sand spraying into the air. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. The recruit collapsed, sobbing. Silus walked over, patted his shoulder and turned to leave. Battalion commander. You're injured, a sharp-eyed soldier shouted. I saw it then. A long, deep gash on his right arm, blood soaking through his uniform sleeve. My heart seized. I rushed forward. To the medical unit. Now. In the medical unit, my hands trembled as I cleaned and stitched the wound. 7 stitches in all. He never made a sound, never flinched. It was as if the arm wasn't his. Afterward I helped him home. He held my hand tightly with his good one the whole way. At home I made him lie down. Ilara. His voice was rough. Were you scared? He asked. That was all it took. The dam broke. Tears I'd been holding back streamed down my face. I threw myself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably against his chest. He held me awkwardly with his good arm, patting my back. It's okay. Don't be afraid. I'm fine. I cried for a long time, releasing all the fear, the stress, the loneliness of the past months. When the tears finally subsided, I looked up at him, my eyes red and swollen. Silus Thorne, I sniffled. Don't you ever do that again. I won't allow anything to happen to you. He looked down at me, his gray eyes reflecting my tear-streaked face. Slowly, he lowered his head and gently kissed the tears from my cheeks. Then his lips found mine. This kiss was nothing like the brief, tentative ones before. It was deep, possessive, filled with the metallic taste of blood and a raw, unyielding need that swept away all my thoughts. I could only respond, clinging to him. That night, the quilt that had separated us was finally pushed aside. In the most intimate moment, under the faint light, I saw the crisscrossing of old scars on his back. Silent medals from a life of service. I melted into him, whispering his name over and over. Silus. Silus. My man. Early the next morning he still left. He moved quietly, but I was awake. I felt his kiss on my forehead before he slipped out the door. The moment it closed, my tears fell silently. I knew then that waiting would become a permanent part of my life. And I was ready. The base felt emptier without him. The air itself seemed thinner, the Gobi's vastness more imposing. My heart had left with him on that jeep, and my days became a cycle of work and waiting. Every day I'd find an excuse to walk by the barracks' main gate, my eyes scanning the horizon for a returning convoy. Life at the medical team continued, but a tense undercurrent ran through the compound because of the large-scale exercise. The gossip mill, of course, was churning. Mrs. Deng was at the center of it, her voice a constant, grating murmur. Have you heard? She'd say to a group of wives who'd lean in closer. The opposing force is that elite blue army. Invincible, they say. The pressure must be immense. My old Deng hasn't slept properly for days. Oh, do you think Battalion Commander Thorne will be as lucky as last time? I heard he offended the division commander, and now he's been given the toughest assignment. Her words were like poison darts. They irritated me so much I'd often get up and leave without a word. I was walking home one afternoon, stewing in quiet anger, when I saw Deputy Battalion Commander Deng himself pacing anxiously outside my door. When he spotted me, he rushed over, his face pale. Sister-in-law. Thank goodness you're back. Deputy Battalion Commander Deng? What's wrong? It's my wife, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. She heard some wild rumor about heavy casualties in the drill, that Battalion Commander Thorne was. She got so worked up it sent her into labor. It's too early. Please, you have to come. My medical training kicked in, overriding any personal animosity. I grabbed my kit and followed him at a run to their home. Mrs. Deng was lying on her bed, her face ashen, soaked in cold sweat. A quick check confirmed the worst. She's in premature labor. This is bad. We need to get her to the military hospital. Now. The car. Deputy Deng panicked. All the vehicles are with the exercise. Then find a messenger. I commanded, my voice sharper than I intended, channeling Silas's calm authority. Send a telegram to the division command center immediately. Report the situation and request emergency medical transport. Tell them it's Battalion Commander Thorne's order. It was a huge risk using Silas's name without his knowledge. Military communication was ironclad. But a life was at stake. Everyone else, boil water, get clean towels. I began directing the small crowd that had gathered. Under my orders, the chaos slowly turned into organized action. Within half an hour, an ambulance, summoned from the distant command center, screeched to a halt on the parade ground. Mrs. Deng was loaded in and rushed away. Thanks to the swift response, both mother and child survived. The story spread through the camp like wildfire. The looks I got changed from curiosity or pity to genuine respect and trust. Even Mrs. Deng, after she returned from the hospital with a healthy baby boy, came to my door with a basket of eggs, her face flushed with shame. Lara, sister-in-law. I was wrong before, she mumbled. Please don't hold it against me. This time if it weren't for you Sister Deng, don't say that, I said, helping her inside. We're all military families here. We look out for each other. We're family. After she left, I looked out at the stark, beautiful desolation of the Gobi, and my heart felt clear and light. I thought I understood Silus a little better then. I understood why he chose this hard life, to protect this land, his comrades, his family. And as his wife, my duty was to hold our home together, to be his strength, not his weakness. 2 weeks later the exercise ended. The day the troops returned, the entire camp erupted in celebration. I stood in the crowd at the gates, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on the dusty road. Finally the convoy appeared. The trucks rolled to a stop and soldiers, sunburned and caked in dust but glowing with triumph, jumped down. I spotted Silus immediately. He looked thinner, wearier, a dark stubble on his jaw, but his posture was still ramrod straight, his eyes sharper than ever. He was scanning the crowd. When his gaze found mine, his stern expression softened into that rare, tender smile. He started toward me. I couldn't wait. I ran to him and in front of everyone I threw my arms around him, holding him tight. I'm back, he said, his voice rough with dust and emotion near my ear. Welcome home, I whispered, burying my face in his neck, breathing in the familiar sense of gunpowder, sweat and him. I didn't care about the tears streaming down my face. The exercise had been a resounding success. Silus's battalion, as the main assault force, had executed a brilliant decapitation operation against the elite Blue Army, shattering their myth of invincibility. Silus himself was awarded a second-class merit for his leadership. All the rumors about him being in disgrace evaporated into nothing. At the victory banquet, the division commander himself clapped Silus on the shoulder, laughing heartily. Good lad, Thorn. Knew I wasn't wrong about you. Silus, ever stoic, just raised his glass and drank it all in one go. He was a little drunk when we walked home later, the moonlight painting everything silver. I supported him, his arm heavy across my shoulders. Ilara. He stopped suddenly, turning to cup my face in his hands. You know, when I was lying in that damned cold ditch, hungry and tired, all I could think about was you waiting for me at home. It gave me all the strength I needed. His eyes were brilliant in the moonlight, filled with a fervent emotion I'd never seen so openly before. I heard about what you did for Mrs. Deng, he said, his callous thumb stroking my cheek. My little wife has grown up. You can stand on your own now. Of course, I said, a surge of pride making me tilt my chin up. Look who my husband is. He laughed then, a low, rich sound that vibrated through his chest, full of satisfaction and pride. He lowered his head and kissed me, a deep, claiming kiss that tasted of liquor and victory and home. Back inside our home he pinned me against the door, his kisses trailing down my neck. Ilara, he murmured, his voice thick with longing. Have a child with me. A daughter like you. Or a son like me. I didn't answer with words. I showed him with my hands, my lips, my entire body. That night, we made up for every second of the half-month we'd been apart. Outside, the Gobi was silent under the moon. Inside, our little home was filled with love and promise. I finally understood. Marrying a soldier wasn't just marrying a man. It was marrying a belief, a duty, a guardian. And I embraced it willingly and gladly. The following spring, a miracle happened. A faint wash of green appeared on the barren Gobi. And my body, like the land, was nurturing new life. When Captain Chin at the medical team smiled and confirmed it, Lara, congratulations. You're pregnant. I could hardly believe it. I decided to tell Silus that evening. He was home, meticulously peeling an apple for me. He'd become even more attentive if that was possible. Silus, I began, my voice slightly shaky. He didn't look up, focused on the spiral of apple peel. We're going to have a baby. The fruit knife clattered to the floor. The man who had remained unshaken facing down a live grenade stared at me, utterly dumbfounded. What? He stammered, his voice uncharacteristically weak. What did you say? I laughed, joy bubbling up. I said, you're going to be a father. He shot to his feet, paced around the small room twice, then rushed back to me, dropping to his knees and carefully pressing his ear against my still flat stomach. "I can't hear anything," he said, looking up at me with a puzzled, almost comical expression. I burst out laughing. "It's only been 2 months. What did you expect to hear?" The realization dawned on him and he broke into a wide, unreserved smile, looking for all the world like a happy little boy. From that day on, I became the undisputed center of his universe. He wouldn't let me lift a finger, taking over all cooking and cleaning. He even went to Captain Chin to learn about nutritious meals for pregnant women. The medical team put me on light duty. I became the most pampered woman on the base. In the autumn, I gave birth to a son. He was perfect, 7 pounds 6 ounces with a pair of healthy lungs that could surely be heard back in my hometown. Silus named him and meaning, peace. "I don't need him to achieve great things," Silus said, his voice full of uncharacteristic softness as he gazed at the tiny bundle in his arms. "I just want him to have a lifetime of peace." Watching the formidable battalion commander Thorne, who commanded hundreds of men, now clumsily cradling his newborn son and humming off-key lullabies, my heart felt so full I thought it might burst. Time passed in a blissful blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. A year later, a piece of news about Leo found its way to me, like a dried leaf blown in from a forgotten season. It was Mrs. Deng of all people who told me, now a firm friend. He said Leo never got his promotion. Fei Wang had dropped him completely after he'd slapped her in the department store. Later he'd offended someone else and had been fired from the factory, slinking back to his village in disgrace. I listened and felt nothing. The man who had once been the center of my universe was now a vague, insignificant footnote. My world was now full of Silus, of Little, and of this life we had built together. Another dusk settled over the Gobi. And who had just learned to walk, stood wobbling at our doorstep, waiting. In the distance, the setting sun bathed the desert in a deep, golden glow. Right on time, Silas's figure appeared at the end of the path. "Duh!" and cried, breaking free from my hold and toddling unsteadily toward him on his chubby little legs. Silus quickened his pace, a slight limp from an old injury barely noticeable. He swept down, scooped our son into his arms and planted a kiss on his cheek. Then holding in, he strode toward me. He freed one arm and pulled me into a fierce embrace, our son giggling between us. "I'm back. Welcome home," I said, leaning into him. The three of us stood there, wrapped in the dying light, our shadows stretching long and intertwined behind us. I looked up at Silas's profile, at the faint scar on his brow, and felt a profound, unshakable peace. I was so grateful. So grateful for that moment of insane courage in the state-run restaurant, for the desperate question that had led me to the most perfect ending I could ever have imagined. "Comrade, are you in need of a wife?" Life with a child was a whirlwind of messy, beautiful chaos, and was a happy baby with Silas's serious gray eyes and my stubborn streak. Our small apartment, once so neat and Spartan, was now littered with wooden toys Silus carved in his rare moments of quiet, and tiny socks that seemed to multiply on their own. Silus was a natural father. His military precision adapted surprisingly well to the routines of infancy. He could swaddle and into a perfect, content little bundle and had the patience to feed him when I was at my wits' end with exhaustion. Watching the man who commanded respect from hardened soldiers gently blow on a spoonful of congee for our son did something to my heart every single time. The other wives, now true friends, became my lifeline. Mrs. Deng especially was a fount of knowledge, her earlier bitterness replaced by a fierce, grateful loyalty. We would sit in the weak sunshine outside our homes, our babies playing on a blanket, and share stories. They taught me how to stretch our rations, how to keep the relentless Gobi dust out of our homes, and how to mend clothes until they were more patch than original fabric. I, in turn, shared my nursing knowledge, holding informal classes on infant care and first aid. I was no longer just Battalion Commander Thorne's wife. I was Alara, the nurse, Anne's mother. I had my own place here. Silas's career continued its steady ascent. The success of the exercise had cemented his reputation as a brilliant, if unorthodox, tactician. He was gone more often for longer periods, attending meetings at division headquarters and leading specialized training camps. The absences were a dull, constant ache, but we had built a rhythm around them. The joy of his return always outweaved the pain of his leaving. One evening he came home looking more thoughtful than usual. He played with it on the floor, making a toy truck rumble across the rug before finally speaking. "There's talk of a promotion," he said, his eyes on our son. "Lieutenant Colonel. It would mean a transfer." My heart skipped a beat. A transfer? Where? The city. Regional headquarters. The city. The word sounded mythical. It meant paved roads, real shops, cinemas, a hospital with more than one wing. It meant schools for a future far from this dust and isolation. But it also meant leaving this. Our first home. The friends who had become family. The stark, beautiful emptiness that had somehow gotten into our bones. I looked around our small, cluttered apartment. I saw the shelf Silus had built for my lotions, the patch on the curtain I'd sewn myself, the spot on the floor where Anne had taken his first steps. These weren't just things, they were the layers of our life together. "What do you think?" I asked softly. He finally looked up at me, his gaze intense. "It is a significant step. Better opportunities. For all of us." He paused. "But my duty is here with my battalion. This is where I am needed. The Gobi, it trains the best soldiers. The toughest." He didn't say he wanted to stay. He stated facts. But I heard the unspoken truth. His soul was woven into this harsh land. He belonged here, commanding the men who guarded this remote stretch of our country. I walked over and sat beside him on the floor, leaning my head against his shoulder, and crawled into my lap. "The city has plenty of lieutenant colonels," I said quietly. "The Gobi only has one Silus Thorn." He was silent for a long moment. Then he turned his head and pressed a kiss into my hair. "The facilities here are poor. For you. For him. We have everything we need," I said, and I meant it. We had each other. That was the foundation everything else was built on. The next week he formally declined the promotion. The news caused a minor stir on the base. Most couldn't understand it. Mrs. Deng clucked her tongue, calling him a stubborn fool. But I saw the new, profound respect in the eyes of his men. Their commander had chosen them over a comfortable desk job in the city. His choice bonded us even closer. It was a silent declaration that our life here, the one we had built from nothing, was more valuable than any title. As Anne grew, so did the challenges. He caught a bad fever one winter, the dreaded pneumonia that swept through the base. For 3 days and nights I barely slept, stationed by his crib, monitoring his breathing, cooling his forehead with damp cloths. Silus cancelled all non-essential duties, spending his evenings sitting with us, his large hand resting gently on Anne's small, feverish back, his presence a silent pillar of strength. When the fever finally broke and Anne slept peacefully, Silus looked at me, his face etched with a fear I'd never seen in him, not even on the training field. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice raw. It was the first time he'd ever admitted to fear. "I know," I whispered, taking his hand. "So was I." We had faced our first true crisis as parents, and we had faced it together. It was a different kind of battle, but it forged our family in a new way. The seasons turned, each one marked by small, precious milestones. Anne's first words, "Duh," came long before Ma, much to my pretended chagrin. His first mid-autumn festival, clutching a sticky mooncake in a death grip. The first time he saluted his father, a wobbly, adorable gesture that made Silas's stern composure crack into a wide, unreserved smile. I found my own purpose deepening at the medical team. Captain Chin began relying on me to train new nurses and even assist with more complex procedures. My experience from the factory clinic, combined with the practical knowledge I'd gained on the base, made me a valuable asset. I was no longer just following orders. I was helping to shape the medical care for our entire community. One day, a new batch of recruits arrived, fresh-faced and nervous boys straight off the train. One of them, from my home province, recognized my accent. His eyes widened when he found out I was the battalion commander's wife. "You're from there?" he asked, amazed. "And you live here?" "By choice." I looked out the medical team window at the endless yellow earth, at the stark lines of the barracks, at the soldiers running drills in the distance. "Yes," I said, a soft smile on my face. "This is home." And I realized with a start that it was true. The girl who had been slapped and humiliated in a state-run restaurant was gone. In her place was a woman who had built a life, a family, a purpose. I had roots here now, deep and strong, tangled with those of the silent, steady man I had married and the vibrant, joyful boy we were raising together. The Gobi wasn't just where we lived. It was a part of who we had become. The peace we'd carved out for ourselves was shattered by a single official-looking letter. It arrived not for me but for Silus, bearing the seal of the Regional Military Command. He opened it at the dinner table, his expression neutral as he read. But I saw the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. He finished reading, folded the letter precisely and set it aside. "What is it?" I asked, my spoon hovering over my bowl. "An inquiry," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Regarding my marriage." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "What? Why?" "An anonymous report," he said, picking up his chopsticks again, "suggesting our marriage was one of convenience. That it may not be legitimate. A violation of regulations." The room seemed to tilt. Anonymous. I knew with a cold certainty that it was Leo. He must have finally discovered Silas's true rank, realized the magnitude of what he'd lost, and chosen this petty, vicious way to strike back. Or perhaps it was someone from my past, someone who remembered the scandal and saw a chance to cause trouble. "They can't believe that," I said, my voice rising. "We have a son. We've been living here for years." "The army must investigate all formal reports," he said, as if reciting a manual. "They will send an investigator." The next few weeks were a special kind of hell. The news, as it always did, leaked. The stares returned, but this time they were laced with suspicion, not curiosity. Whispers followed me everywhere. "Paper marriage. Did you know she just grabbed him at her engagement party? Maybe she trapped him." Mrs. Deng was my fiercest defender, shushing anyone who dared gossip within her earshot, but the damage was done. The trust one had worked so hard to build felt fragile, like glass about to crack. The investigator arrived, a Colonel Zhao, a man with a pinched face and eyes that missed nothing. He interviewed Silus for hours behind closed doors. He interviewed me separately, his questions polite but piercing, digging into the details of our first meeting, our motivations, the timeline of our relationship. "And you approached Major Thorne, a complete stranger, and proposed marriage immediately after your previous engagement was dissolved?" he asked, his pen poised over his notebook. "Yes," I said, holding my head high though my insides were trembling. "I did." "And what did Major Thorne say?" "He said his unit was short of a family member." Colonel Zhao's eyebrow twitched. He made a note. "He interviewed our neighbors, Captain Chen, even the young guard who had picked me up from the train station that first day." The base was under a cloud of tense anticipation. Silus remained an immovable rock. He answered every question with stoic brevity, his demeanor never changing. But at home, the silence that settled between us was heavy and strained. It wasn't the comfortable quiet we usually shared. It was the silence of unspoken fear. One night, after Anne was asleep, I couldn't take it anymore. "What if they don't believe us?" I whispered in the dark, my voice small. "What will happen?" He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then his hand found mine under the quilt. "Then I will be discharged." The starkness of the words took my breath away. The army was his life, his identity. To lose it would be to lose a part of his soul. "No," I said, tears welling. "Silus, no. We'll tell them the truth. All of it. The humiliation, Leo, everything. They have to understand. The truth is that I married you because I chose to," he said, his voice low and firm. "The reasons do not matter to them. Only the regulations matter." "It matters to me," I cried, turning to face him. "I will not let them take your career because of my mistake. Because of my past." He pulled me into his arms then, holding me tightly against his chest. "Ilara," he said, his voice a rough whisper against my hair. "Marrying you was not a mistake. It is the best, most decisive action I have ever taken. If I must choose between the army and you, the choice is already made." I wept then, not just from fear but from the overwhelming, terrifying love I felt for this man. He was willing to sacrifice everything for me, for our family. The investigation dragged on. The strain began to show on Silus. He was quieter, more withdrawn. The laughter that had become more frequent in our home vanished. We were going through the motions, a shadow over our little family. The breaking point came during a parents' day at the base nursery. And now a boisterous toddler was playing with blocks. Another child, a bully named Little Lee, pushed him over and stole his block. And frustrated and upset shouted, "You're a meanie. My daddy is a soldier. He'll protect me." Little Lee, parroting something he'd undoubtedly heard at home, sneered. No, he's not. My mama says your daddy's a liar and your mama's a fake. I saw the words hit in like a physical blow. His little face crumpled in confusion and hurt. He didn't understand the meaning, but he understood the malice. Before I could move, Silus was there. He didn't shout. He didn't even look at the other child's parents, who were watching with smug curiosity. He simply knelt down in front of our son, blocking out the rest of the world. He said, his voice calm and clear, carrying in the sudden quiet. Look at me. And sniffled, looking into his father's face. I am your father. That is the truth. Your mother is your mother. That is the truth. We are a family. That is the truth. He spoke each word with absolute, unshakable certainty. Nothing anyone says can ever change that. Do you understand? And nodded, his tears slowing. The simple, powerful truth in his father's voice was more convincing than any denial. Silus stood up, picking it up in his arms. He turned, and his gaze swept over the small crowd that had gathered. His eyes held a cold fire I had never seen before. My family is not a subject for discussion, he said, his voice low but cutting through the air like a blade. It was a warning, not a plea. Then he turned and walked away, carrying our son, with me following close behind, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective pride. That evening, Colonel Zhao requested a final meeting. We sat in his temporary office, Silus and I, side by side, our hands clasped tightly together on the table. Colonel Zhao looked from Silus's resolute face to mine. He sighed, closing his file. Major Thorne, Mrs. Thorne, he began. The Army's regulations on marriage are strict for a reason. They are meant to ensure stability, to prevent impropriety. He paused, steepling his fingers. However, my investigation has found no evidence of wrongdoing. Your service record, Major Thorne, is exemplary. Your standing among your men is formidable. He almost smiled. And it is clear to me that yours is a functional, committed family unit. The report appears to be malicious in nature. He closed the file with a definitive snap. The matter is closed. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical force. I swayed in my chair and Silus's grip on my hand tightened, holding me steady. Thank you, Colonel, Silus said, his voice even, though I could feel the tremor in his hand. As we walked home, the weight that had been crushing us for weeks was gone. The air felt lighter. Silus didn't say anything, but he kept my hand in his thumb stroking my knuckles. That night, after we put into bed, he pulled me into our room and just held me, his face buried in my neck, breathing deeply. We had faced the enemy together and we had won. The investigation had tried to unravel us, but instead, it had pulled the threads of our marriage tighter, weaving us into something even stronger and more resilient. The shadow was gone. We had passed the test. The peace that followed the investigation was deeper and sweeter than before. We had faced a threat from within, from the past, and overcome it. Our little family unit felt fortified, our bonds tempered in fire, and grew from a toddler into a bright, curious little boy. He adored his father, mimicking his stern expressions and trying to march in step with him. With me, he was all softness and endless questions about the world. Our life settled into a new, joyful rhythm. Silus's reputation, far from being damaged by the inquiry, was enhanced. His unwavering integrity during the process and his fierce public defense of his family only increased the respect his men and superiors had for him. He was given command of a larger, more strategically important sector of the border. With greater command came greater responsibility and longer periods away from home. The absences were a part of our life I had learned to accept but never to like, and would mark the days on a calendar I made for him, his little face lighting up when we reached the picture of a jeep that meant, Daddy comes home. One autumn, the exercises were longer and more intense than usual. A tense quiet had settled over the entire region, the kind that precedes a storm. The news on the crackling base radio spoke of heightened tensions elsewhere. We felt it even in our remote corner of the Gobi. Silus had been gone for 3 weeks. The promised return date came and went without a word. This wasn't entirely unusual. Exercises could be extended, but a cold knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. Captain Chin noticed my distraction. "They're fine, Alara," she said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "These things happen. Communications blackout." I nodded, trying to believe her. But the knot wouldn't loosen. 2 more days passed. Then late in the afternoon I saw a military jeep, not Silas's usual vehicle, driving too fast towards the family quarters. It didn't head to the command center. It headed straight for my home. My blood ran cold. I dropped the shirt I was mending and ran to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The jeep skidded to a halt. It was Deputy Battalion Commander Deng who got out, his face grim and pale. My knees went weak. I grabbed the doorframe for support. "Sister-in-law," he said, his voice strained. "Where is he?" I demanded, my own voice a terrified whisper. "Where's Silus?" "He's alive," Deng said quickly, seeing the terror on my face. "He's alive. But there was an incident. A border skirmish. His jeep, it hit a landmine." The world swam around me. Landmine. The word echoed, horrible and final. "How bad?" I choked out. "He's at the field hospital. He took shrapnel in his leg inside. He lost a lot of blood, but the surgeons are working on him now. A helicopter is on its way to take you to him." The next few hours were a blur. Mrs. Deng appeared instantly, whisking a confused and away to her home with promises of candy and toys. I was bundled into a helicopter, the roar of the blades matching the frantic beating of my heart. I stared out at the endless, unforgiving landscape below, praying to any god that would listen. The field hospital was a chaotic, grim place. The smell of antiseptic and blood was overwhelming. A harried nurse directed me to a recovery ward. And then I saw him. Silus lay on a cot, unconscious, his skin ashen against the white sheets. His leg was heavily bandaged and elevated. More bandages wrapped around his torso. Tubes and wires connected him to beeping machines. Hooked, broken. The strong, immovable pillar of my life was lying helpless. A doctor approached me. "Mrs. Thorne? He's through the worst of it. The surgery was successful. We've stopped the bleeding and repaired the damage. But the leg, it was a severe compound fracture. There will be a long recovery. There may be a permanent limp." I didn't care about a limp. I only cared that he was breathing. I pulled a stool to his bedside and took his hand, careful of the fore. His fingers were cold. I chafed them gently, whispering his name. It was 2 days before he regained full consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain and medication. They focused on me and a weak frown creased his brow. "Elara," his voice was a dry rasp. "Why are you here?" And is fine. "He's with the Dengs," I said, squeezing his hand, my tears finally falling freely. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The days that followed were a test of a different kind. I rarely left his side, helping the nurses, feeding him, talking to him about nothing and everything, trying to anchor him to the world as he drifted in and out of pain-filled sleep. The formidable battalion commander Thorne was a terrible patient. He was frustrated by his weakness, irritable with the confinement. He obsessively asked for updates on his men, on the situation at the border. The army was his life and he was trapped away from it. The only time he was calm was when I talked about it. I told him about our son's latest adventures, the new words he was learning. I brought drawings and had made crude stick figures of Daddy and a big green jeep. After a week, he was well enough to be transferred back to our base hospital. The return home was a relief, but the real work was just beginning. Physical therapy was agony. I would stand outside the therapy room, my heart breaking as I heard his grunts of pain, the sharp, bitten-off curses. Sometimes he would lash out in frustration, his temper shorter than I'd ever known it. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, he sat on the edge of our bed, head in his hands, the picture of despair. "It's no use," he muttered, his voice thick. "I'll never command again. A crippled officer is a useless officer." I knelt in front of him, taking his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "Listen to me, Silus Thorne," I said, my voice fierce. "You are not your leg. You are your mind. Your courage. Your integrity. That is what commands men. Not whether you can march in a straight line." He looked at me, the doubt warring with the need to believe. "The doctor said you will walk again," I pressed on. "It will be hard. It will hurt. But you are the strongest man I know. You have faced down grenades and landmines and bureaucratic colonels. You will face this. And I will be right here every step of the way. Do you understand me?" A slow, determined light began to replace the despair in his eyes. He gave a single sharp nod. From that day on his attitude changed. The frustration was channeled into a grim, relentless determination. He practiced walking with a crutch, then a cane, his face pale with pain but set with unwavering resolve. And would toddle alongside him, mimicking his father's limping gait, offering his tiny hand for support. It was a long, slow road. There were setbacks and days of dark moods. But we persevered. Together. 3 months after the injury, Silus stood before a medical board. They assessed his recovery, his mobility, his mental state. I waited outside, clutching Anne's hand, my stomach in knots. The door opened. Silus walked out, his limp pronounced but his posture straight. He didn't smile, but his eyes met mine, and in them I saw a quiet triumph. "Well," I breathed. "Fit for duty," he said. "With certain modifications." The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. He was back. He was whole. That evening we sat outside watching the sun set over the Gobi. And played in the dirt at our feet. Silas's cane leaned against his chair. "They're offering me a teaching position," he said quietly. "At the military academy. It's a desk job. A good one. In the city." I looked at him, waiting. He was silent for a long time, watching our son. Then he shook his head. "My place is here. This is my command. This is my home." He reached over and took my hand. Our home. The storm had passed. It had left its scars, a limp, a memory of fear, a deeper understanding of fragility. But we were still standing. Our roots, tested by wind and fire and metal, had held fast. We were bent but not broken. And we were together. Time, which had once seemed to crawl in the vastness of the Gobi, now began to accelerate. The years folded into one another, marked not by calendars but by the gradual changes in our lives. And grew from a little boy into a young man, inheriting his father's height and steady demeanor and my curiosity about the world. Our home was filled with his books, his sketches of airplanes and soldiers, and the lively debates we'd have at the dinner table. Silus, to my endless amusement, would engage in these debates with the same serious intensity he used for tactical planning, treating our son's opinions with a respect that made him stand a little taller. Silas's leg never fully recovered. The limp was a permanent part of him, a slight unevenness in his stride that he refused to let slow him down. It seemed, if anything, to have increased the respect his men had for him. He was no longer just a brilliant commander. He was a warrior who had faced the enemy and endured. He never took the desk job in the city. The Gobi was in his soul, and he remained its steadfast guardian, eventually earning the rank of full colonel. My own work at the medical team evolved. With Captain Chen's retirement, I effectively took over its day-to-day running. I trained new nurses, implemented better sanitation protocols, and even started a small prenatal care program for the wives. The young, terrified girl who had proposed to a stranger was now a confident, respected leader in her own small community. We never had another child. The doctors said the injuries from the landmine incident had made it too risky. There was a moment of sadness, but it was quickly overshadowed by the joy we found in it. He was more than enough. The outside world began to slowly seep into our remote existence. The base got a proper satellite dish. We saw news from bustling cities that seemed a world away from our dusty outpost, and became fascinated with engineering, with the world beyond the wire fence. One evening he laid a brochure on the table. It was for a prestigious university in the capital with a renowned engineering program. Silus picked it up, his face unreadable as he studied it. "This is a long way from home," he said finally. "I know," and said, his voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "But it's the best program. I want to apply." I looked at my son, saw the eager light in his eyes, the future stretching out before him. My heart ached with a fierce, proud love and the sharp pang of impending loss. Silus was silent for a long time. He looked from the brochure to Anne's hopeful face, then to me. I gave him a small, tearful smile and a nod. He placed the brochure back on the table with a definitive tap. "Then you will apply," he said. "And you will work hard. A thorn does nothing by halves." The day we put in on the train to the capital was one of the hardest of my life. I held him tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, memorizing the feel of his strong young arms around me. Silus stood beside us, his hand on Anne's shoulder, his usual stoicism softened by a profound emotion. "Make us proud, son," he said, his voice rough. "I will, father," and promised, his own voice thick. We stood on the platform, waving until the train disappeared into the hazy distance, leaving behind a silence that felt immense and empty. The house was too quiet without him. The absence of his laughter, his debates, his clutter was a physical presence. Silus and I circled each other for days, two satellites who had lost their central planet. But slowly we found a new rhythm. It was just the two of us again, back where we started, but so profoundly different. The desperate, uncertain couple who had shared a bed with a quilt between them was gone. In their place were two people whose lives were deeply, irrevocably intertwined. We would take long walks at dusk, his limp a slow, steady rhythm beside me. We didn't need to talk much. We had shared a lifetime of words. Now we shared a comfortable silence, filled with the memory of all we had built together. One such evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of orange and purple, he stopped and turned to me. His hair was shot through with silver now, the lines on his face etched by sun and responsibility and laughter. He was more handsome to me than ever. "Ilara," he said, taking both my hands in his. They were still calloused, still strong. "When you walked up to me that day, it was the bravest thing I have ever witnessed." I smiled, squeezing his hands. "It was the most foolish." "It was fate," he corrected me, his gray eyes holding mine. "You gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond duty." He paused, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "You have made me a happy man." Tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so complete it had to overflow. "And you, Silas Thorne," I whispered. "You gave me everything. You took a chance on a desperate girl and gave her a life beyond her dreams." He leaned down and kissed me, a slow, tender kiss that tasted of love, of time, of the desert dust that was a part of us. We turned and continued our walk, hand in hand, toward the lights of our home. The Gobi stretched out around us, vast and eternal. It was no longer a place of exile. It was our kingdom. We had planted our flag here, raised our son here, fought our battles here. We had loved here. The harvest of our life together was not in medals or promotions, but in the quiet, unshakable knowledge that we had built something lasting. From an absurd beginning in a state-run restaurant, we had forged a love as strong and enduring as the ancient land itself. We had weathered humiliation, gossip, investigation, and war. And we were still standing side by side. I looked up at my husband, at the faint scar on his brow, and my heart was full. The desperate question I had asked a lifetime ago had been answered 1,000 times over. "Comrade, are you in need of a wife?" "Yes." And he had needed her and she him for all the days of their lives. The end.